Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank some very important people. I want to thank Juan Yankulef and Juanita Kepurka for their wonderful blessing for here, as well as their assistance. I want to thank Benjamin Gelich and his staff, as well as Fundación Lobeliana. I also want to thank La Baita and Isabel Correa and her staff. And I'd also like to especially thank Manolo and Donna Torres, dear friends, as well as Jim Baumel, mi compañero. Okay, so I'll begin. For centuries, the Huichol people, they're known as, outsiders call them Huichol, so I sometimes call them Huichol, but they call themselves Huijarica, or the plural is Huijaritari. And they have been making this long pilgrimage. It's over 300 miles east of where they live in the Sierras to the desert of San Luis Potosi. And this is their sacred peyote land that they call Wirikuta. Here's a view of Wirikuta. And I wanted to start with a really moving account from one Huichol person, and she says, Wirikuta, the sacred peyote desert, is one of the most beautiful places I know. There, all our gods gather and protect us. We travel to Wirikuta in the same way that the gods traveled. We walk for many days to the same places where the gods had passed. We try to see what our gods saw and learn their lessons. When I go to Wirikuta, I don't want to go home. My name is Santiago, and I'm 9 years old. Yeah, so I'm talking about peyote through the whole life cycle in Huichol culture. And I'll start first by discussing a little bit about where the Huichols live and where the peyote is. So the Huichols live in primarily in the state of Jalisco in Mexico. Here's where San Blas, down here's Puerto Vallarta, Mazatlan's up there. Here's Tepic, and then up here is the Huichol Sierra Madre Occidental. And they have many sacred places in the Sierra, as well as the 4 cardinal points. So they go to the ocean, to the goddess of the sea. They go south to south of Guadalajara, where there's a lake, and that's where they go and they leave offerings. Archaeologists have found that this is an ancient place where in pre-Columbian times, offerings have also been left by their predecessors. In Durango, there are a series of caves that they also go to where the goddess lives, and then Wirikuta, which is where the sacred peyote desert is. So they have to walk, like I say, about 300 miles to be able to get to their peyote and to the desert. And so this is what the Sierra looks like. It's 7,000, in some places almost 8,000 feet above sea level. Very deep ravines and river that passes through, and these are these mesa tops. And Huichols have their ceremonial communities, which are now becoming pueblos on the mesa top, but they have ranchos throughout the whole area, and they move around depending upon the time of year and what they're going to be doing. This is still, I'm happy to say, typical of when you leave the mesa top and where the road is, and you go down and you'll see that they still have the traditional houses, fairly traditional lifestyle when they are in their ranches. So imagine a culture where a mind-altering plant is ever present and integrated into virtually every aspect of life. From pilgrimages and ceremonies to myths and songs to the brightly colored designs seen under the influence of the powerful plant they duplicate onto their clothing, bags, offerings, and works of art. And peyote is always present at all of the cycle of life. And so this is a yarn painting. This is actually a commercial piece of art, but it came from the smaller version where they'd have a board, a piece of wood, they put beeswax down, and they will then design it with yarn, and with the offerings that they leave, they don't completely fill it. But this has turned into an art form of its own that's a storytelling device and is a way that they can also more visually express to themselves and the outside some of their experiences. So peyote is an enculturating force that provides a unique path for Wijarika to communicate directly with the gods in their pantheon. It's not like you have to wait till a priest or even the shaman tells you what is going on and can be the only one who has access. Everyone can, but the shaman is the one who will help with the interpretation of what it means. So in other words, the Wijaritari are not just passive believers of the worldview they were taught when they were very young, but rather they interact with aspects of it, and through their visionary experiences, their cultural beliefs become very real and deeply imprinted in their lives. It's part of them. So there are various myths about the origin of the pilgrimage to the Peyote Desert. This one I collected from the female shamans that I've been working with. And it's the story of 3 Huichol women, goddesses, who were looking to find the path to Wirikuta. And one of them, Utuanaka, who's the moist earth goddess, that she was weaving on her loom and manifested the path to Wirikuta. It just appeared. And so they followed it, and before they entered, there's an entrance to Wirikuta that the Hayumari, the deer god, was looking to see if they were fertile. And 2 of them, the moist earth goddess as well as another one, Wili Ubi, were menstruating. And so they could enter Wirikuta because they were fertile. But Yuame was not fertile, and so she couldn't enter Wirikuta, and she ended up becoming a mountain on the outskirts of Wirikuta. So from that, they learned about the peyote. They became pregnant when they had eaten the peyote, and Wili Ubi stayed to become the goddess of peyote. And Utuanaka went back to the Sierra to share with her community the stories and the importance of peyote and the way to get back and forth to the Peyote Desert. So, I don't know how many of you are directly familiar with peyote. It doesn't grow in just any place. So there's more than 60 alkaloids in it. And of those, and we're still finding more, and there's so much more to learn, but mescaline is the one particular alkaloid that has the effects that we recognize as peyote experiences. And so the interaction with the peyote alkaloids within the nerve cells in the brain increases and alters information to the senses, if you're talking in scientific terms. So 3 hours after ingesting peyote is when you'll start seeing designs. And they will, if it's a fairly low dose, it will appear like this. But if you have more, it then becomes even more in movement, more colors, and Huichols have given meaning to these designs, saying that they are communications from the gods, and that the women afterwards, it's their responsibility to duplicate these in their artwork. And usually you see most of the very vibrant ones like this in their embroideries. Because if they don't do this, because it's a gift from the gods, if they don't duplicate these, then harm could come to them, they could get sick, somebody might die, and the same happens to their families as well. So after you have this experience, and if you have enough of a strong enough peyote, then you will experience like you're going through a tunnel, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And then when you reach the bright light and you come into out of the tunnel, you feel like you're in a lucid dream. And so you actually see anthropomorphic figures and images and people and animals and plants and landscapes, and you are interacting with them. And so this is the ultimate experience that Huichols hope to have. And this is where they get their lessons then from the gods who will be talking with them. And Huichols are botanists in their own right, and they recognize different aspects of peyote. So one of them is, excuse me, the forms that they come in. Some of them, excuse me, that have been explained to me, one is iku, which is kernels of corn on a particular peyote, so they call these iku. Another is, other forms are nierica, or the shape of a star. There's also the kiere, which is related to salandra, which is also a very powerful kind of a sorcery type of plant that they have that few use because it is so potent and it is a whole different experience. Let's see, how do I get this down here? And then there's also maja, which is the deer. And so you see that the deer and peyote are the same thing. And in this photo, it's iku. It looks like the little kernels of corn on it. Okay. They also recognize peyote can grow in clusters, in different kinds of formations. So they recognize various ones of these too. Some of them, they say, have the shape of the votive gourds. They're these hard shell gourds that they grow, and then they cut the seeds out, they clean it up, and then they will put offerings in there, often with beeswax and beads to make in the signs of people and animals. And also there's always in the very middle a nierica, which is like a portal to the other world. So some of these can have these types of shapes, as well as the shaman's basket, which is a oblong basket that they say is also a kind of cluster that you find. But especially interesting, snakes. And they say that they appear in the form of a snake. And this is actually one that Jim and I collected. And I'm told that if you find peyote in the shape of a snake, you'll often find a real snake, rattlesnake, on the side of it too. So there's an idea that's presented by Michael Winkelmann, which is the idea of psycho-integrative plants. And so he says that there are three types of the brain functioning in humans. There's the R-complex brain, or the reptilian brain, the paleomammalian brain, and then the neomammalian brain associated with the neurocortex. So psycho-integrative plants, many of these that we call sacred plants that you have visions from, they are integrating all three aspects of your brain, the three different brains, and combining them together. And that's what creates such an important experience that people have. Okay. Yeah, it seems like when I take it a little down, okay, yeah. So in the 1960s and the 1970s, there was research that was conducted by scientists in the United States, because There was concern that LSD was very harmful to people and it would cause chromosomal damages, which they have found is not true at all. But in those days, they wanted to find out, and they were certain there was going to be something wrong with if you consumed peyote or LSD or any kinds of these entheogens. And so they did experiments on pregnant rats, monkeys, mice, and they would inject them with mescaline, and then they would sacrifice them, and then they would examine where the peyote went, or the mescaline in this case. And they found that the mescaline does cross the placental barrier, and it also can cross into the brain barrier. And so infants or feti can feel the effects of peyote. And when this occurs, they feel it stronger if they're earlier in development as opposed to later in development. And once the evidence of the mescaline has left the mother's body and brain, it takes longer for the fetus. So, it makes me wonder, well, what is going on with this? It just seems like, what do Huichol women have to say about it? And Huichol women say that the fetus definitely feels the effects. And they say that it's like it dances. It's a long period of quiet, and then it starts dancing, and there's a lot of movement. And that, they're very cautious with this too. They go with a shaman, and especially in the first trimester, they say you might abort unless you go to a shaman. And then as they move through to the second trimester and the third trimester, they say you should be fine. And so I noticed this because I went on the pilgrimage, and there were pregnant women on the pilgrimage, and they're eating lots of peyote. And I got to see their babies when they were born, and they seemed fine, So it doesn't seem like it's a maladaptive trait. It's not something that I am encouraging anybody in our society to do. But they have in their culture, in their ways, they see this as something that's a good thing to do. And so that puts a whole nother idea on what you're talking about as far as a whole culture that uses entheogens throughout their life. One woman was saying to me, when the mother eats peyote, she knows everything that's happening, and the baby knows it too. The baby feels the same as the mother. When a woman is pregnant, even the baby inside receives messages from the deer, messages from the peyote. The baby always feels the same as a person would. The baby cannot speak, but it communicates without words. Only its iyari, which is a concept Huichols have, which is like a heart memory that you are born with. It's generational. You inherit this through your ancestors. And that's what's going on, they say, when the baby is feeling the effects of the peyote as well. Researchers propose that the internal and external stimulation of the fetal neural cortex may help with the wiring in the brain. In fact, the earlier the stimulation, they're not saying what kind, but the earlier the stimulation, the better the child's central nervous system will develop, including cognitive, reflex, musical abilities, etc. Therefore, peyote consumed by the mother appears to have a stimulating effect on the baby. So one woman was telling me, in Wirikuta, I thought we'd eat a lot of peyote to see what we could find, to learn more about our customs. Then I ate 8 large peyotes, and the peyote was strong. I got dizzy, and then I got sick. I never thought I was pregnant. Kayumari, the deer messenger, appeared as a person and told me how I felt. He was speaking to me from the heart. I think Kayumari was speaking to my son in my womb. I didn't think I was pregnant. Later, the shaman said that the gods gave him to me in Wirikuta with our goddess, Wiliuvi, the mother of peyote, so that our customs are not lost. That's why he was born. And that's why they gave him to me in Wirikuta, with me eating peyote. That's why he is peyote. He really likes to eat peyote. That's how some are born. So it's really interesting to contemplate these perinatal experiences. And Stanislav Grof has talked about this, and he says perinatal experiences transcend biology and have important psychological, philosophical, and spiritual dimensions. And he maintains that the existence of authentic perinatal experiences, you can't deny it, that, what your memories from the womb are part of a human being's unconscious. So it's interesting to contemplate how peyote-related perinatal experiences could influence some cognitive development or allow individuals to access dimensions of human consciousness generally unknown in Western culture. It's almost as if their brains are rewired or are developing in a different way than if you don't have these kinds of stimuli while you're in the womb. So like I say again, if Huichols have been doing this for so many hundreds, if not longer, time period, that it must not be maladaptive. Why would they do it then if they think that they're going to be harming their fetus? Children are the most precious thing in their lives. They want to have as many kids as they can. And so I don't think that they would be doing this if it wasn't good for what they see in their society. And Wijari themselves say their peyote customs come from their gods and are orchestrated by the old wise shamans. The health and well-being of the people and the destiny of their children are in the hands of the shamans and the elders. So they are following in the footsteps of their ancestors. So here's a picture of Estella and one of her babies that also had quite a bit of peyote when she was pregnant and came out to be a fine young woman. So women also consume peyote to induce labor. It is during childhood, during childbirth, mescaline, like LSD, acts as a vasoconstrictor. So women tell me that if they eat a little peyote when they go into labor, the birth is faster and there is less pain and blood. And they don't eat enough to really go out there. They're eating enough so that they will be able to help with the process in a much more agreeable manner. And babies also consume peyote through their mother's milk, because there have been tests that have been done or research, and yes, peyote does come through the milk, through the mother, to the baby if she's been eating it. And I've noticed it with little babies too, and their mothers have commented as well that one might be really fussy, and so then she's been eating peyote, so she gives him her breast, and all of a sudden he's calm and he's like looking like he's grasping at things in the air that nobody else can see. So I mean, they're very familiar with this if their parents are following these peyote traditions. And not every Huichol eats peyote, but most in their lifetime will have at least once. And so I think that exposure to peyote and its psychoactive principles when young allows the Wijarika to perceive the world through a variety of lenses. Introducing peyote to babies while they are in the womb or as children can create distinctive pathways in their cognitive development and may predispose them to be shamans. This is what Huichols say, that if they like peyote, they're going to become a shaman. So peyote is ever present in their world. If it's not from the actual peyote, it's through the songs, the myths, the ceremonies, and the artwork. So I just want to show you, I mean, this surrounds them day in and day out, all of these beautiful designs. And as I said, some children have an affinity for eating peyote. And when my husband Jim and I were on one of these peyote pilgrimages, there was I think she was about a 2-year-old girl, and it was with her family, and it was her first time that she'd been to Wirikuta, first time she'd had peyote. So they gave her a few small little buttons. And she loved them. And she just kept going back and eating them. And then they say, the Spanish translation, drunk with peyote or empeyotado, and that she was dancing, and they were so proud of her, and they just kind of thought it was a little funny, but they were very proud that she liked it so much. And then when they go back to the Sierras, since peyote does not grow in where they live, they bring back peyote fresh as well as dried, that they will plant peyote in gardens in their ranchos. And it's usually just kind of a holding place because they're going to be using it for their ceremonies or for other events. And even the little kids help tend the peyote gardens. And peyotes, that's part of when they start learning how to make art. Peyote appears so many times in their art. This was done by my 5-year-old goddaughter. And this one is a 12-year-old. And yes, they really get it. And then I've been working with the Huichols for about 45 years. And so over the time, I've done various kinds of projects, and I've even given felt tip pens and paper and had them draw on different kinds of themes. And so this is one Huichol boy. He was about 10 years old. And I said, well, what do you want to draw? And he was drawing about, he had gone a year or two before to Wirikuta, and he's showing them harvesting the peyote in the peyote fields. So this is also, Huichols are involved with peyote on a ceremonial level. And this is an Aboriginal temple. It's the Temple of San Jose. This is the shaman who's singing, and this is for the Hikurineira, which is Dance of the Peyote. The pilgrims have just come back, and they have 2 days and 2 nights in which they're consuming peyote, and they're singing, and they're leaving offerings, and they're dancing. And here's some music from this particular ceremony.
Yo in a mana nunim a cheaper little man ana little man nunim Yamo tenamanum ha percy cousin at Tamacam oh wa little semeyanum Imana little Mukana metal see yanema Mukana metal see yanema Tutu ya bukwati no ma tutu ya bukwati no ya tu nu to gane ye kenem ana li ta gane ye kenem wa u ben maku wa u ben ya mala ku wa ai ku ti la ku tutu ya bukwati no tai na ma tutu ya bukwati no ma li tu
So imagine hearing this. It's very haunting, I think, the singing. And you hear this all night long in the temple, inside, and there's just the fire burning, and you're empeyotado, or you're feeling the effects of the peyote. And this is what children also, it's families, it's a whole community of people who carry out these ceremonies. And so in this particular ceremony of Hikurineira, Dance of the Peyote, that Here's a young girl with her mother and father, and she's carrying the sacred corn for their family, and they're being offered. This is peyote that's been ground into powder, and they mix it with water, and then they drink it. So that she's being offered this cup of peyote that she'll be drinking, and some ceremonies when they change the different cargo or responsibilities for the temple, that whoever gets the new responsibilities has to drink 4 cups of that, as well as 4 cups of nawa, which is chicha. Yeah. And then back at the ranches, this is a couple, and they've just come back from the peyote pilgrimage. You can tell because of the feathers in their hats. This is the young son that had come along. And in the peyote desert, they had, as they were harvesting peyote, they were selecting specific peyote for specific people in their family, and especially their kids. And so they do a small ceremony during this time, and then they give the peyote to the ones who weren't able to attend, and they are supposed to confess. It's a ritual that they have to purify yourself. So you need to confess whoever you've had sex with other than your spouse or your partner. And I think it's a way to kind of clean out all of that kind of potential energy from other people, that you're purifying yourself. And so they gave their kids the peyote, and the older daughter, who was 14 at the time, just had a bad trip. And she was moaning and groaning and tossing and turning. You could hear in her house, which was open out to the air. And I was concerned about her, and I asked her mother, I said, is she okay? And she says, you just leave her. The peyote is punishing her. And then the next morning, the mother and the grandmother, who they're both shamans, were in tears beseeching her to please, what's going on here? And it turned out she'd been raped, and she didn't feel comfortable saying that, the names of the people. And so she was purified, and then everything was calm. Yep. So in adolescence, the young people are encouraged to follow a path to become a master in something. And the peyote helps them to achieve that particular goal. This could be becoming a master violin player. And this is something that a lot of the men, if they want to become a shaman, or if they also want to become a master violin player, then they will look to peyote for this as well. And it's a 5-year commitment to making vows to particular gods. Going on the peyote pilgrimage is very much desired, as well as what the peyote tells you, so that you'll be able to have the songs come from the gods. And I've seen even women where in these ceremonies, they've had a lot of peyote, they'll just break into song. And people will then remember it, and they'll sing those songs too. It's sort of like she's brought it to everyone. But as far as the violin, it's a similar kind of thing, although you're the specialist, so you will play that song when you find it important to. So this one Huichol, who is now a shaman, but he was also wanting to learn to be a violin player when he was young, said, the first time I ate peyote, I ate a small amount to see if it would bring me luck. I wanted to play the violin. Then I felt like this. Some animals appeared. They were like dinosaurs. And a big snake. They were all huge, really big. I was surprised to see them. They asked me what I was thinking, what I was feeling. Well, at that time, I got lost, meaning traveling with the peyote. I thought that my companions were no longer alive. There were only the offerings where we had left, and these animals were alive, and they cleaned me with their tongues. Their tongues were huge. They cleaned me completely. Then a light appeared like a star. It came from where the sun rises. First they cleaned me, then the light fell around me and cleaned me completely. Then I appeared like a bright star, a really beautiful light, and then they took me up to the sky. And that's how he learned to play the violin, he says, is by these experiences. So girls are also encouraged to follow. There are female shamans. I've written extensively about that. But to become a master artisan. And it's usually in beadwork, embroidery, and weaving. And so it's the same type of path as becoming a shaman, and peyote is very much encouraged for you to reach this level of mastery. And when you go to the peyote desert, you're leaving offerings to the peyote also for this wish that you have. So here are some of the types of things that this young girl has made. Yeah. So then in the life cycle, they become young parents and they start getting more responsibilities so that they are the ones who are starting to take care of the certain ritual responsibilities that are involved in the yearly as well as the 5-year cycles that they see. And it all revolves around deer, corn, and peyote. So in their summertime is when they are caring for their corn crops. The winter time or the dry season is when they go to the peyote, and in between is when they're hunting the deer. And so these are the types of responsibilities that they are caretakers of, and their children and families help them. And once they become middle-aged, they are the leaders in their families, temples, and community. The elders are the advisors, but the middle-aged people are the ones who really carry out the hardcore types of work as well as ceremonies that need to be completed. And here we see, here's a shaman in Wirikuta, and they've just harvested the first peyotes they found. So she has a candle with her muvieri, which is her power wand to communicate with the gods, and they're leaving offerings. This is a shaman apprentice. We came across him when we were on our pilgrimage to Wirikuta, and the shaman that we're with, who was the one who I quoted about the violin, well, he wanted a guitar player because he said, I can't play very well if I don't have a compañero who's the guitar player. And we were in the middle of San Luis Potosi in the plaza, and here was this guy with his 2 kids, and they started talking. And his story is that he was learning to be a shaman. He almost finished, and then he had an affair with another woman. So he had to start from scratch again. And so here he was with his 2 kids, and he insisted that they come along. And there's just the 3 of them. And so they joined us, and we got to see the places where they go, because it's a different community. If you notice, his shirt is different, his outfit. He's from San Sebastian. And so he was showing us where they go for the peyote. And this was, he had a really elaborate, even these mini yarn paintings and things that he was leaving as offerings in order to finally complete becoming a shaman. So as elders, and this is a wise old shaman, very, very powerful guy. Shamans are the wise guardians of ancient knowledge, of traditions, and of the peyote. They are the botanists, the doctors, the chemists, the psychologists, and they have a deep understanding of a peyote and how it interacts with the body, mind, and soul. The shamans are very aware of the needs of the people, and they guide on the path. Before, I used to say that Huichols believe when they're in Wirikuta that they become their gods. And then I had a very, very powerful experience with the first pilgrimage I went on. And we'd been in the desert for a number of days, and we'd been eating peyote. And then in the morning was the culmination. And we were getting ready to go find the mother of peyote to leave offerings and eat more peyote. And a older woman, and her face was, this isn't her, but I'm using it to kind of illustrate it, was just really peyoteed out. And she grabbed my arm and she looked so ancient, and the dust from Wirikuta that it flies around a lot of the times she was covered with this light dust. And she started to dance, and she grabbed my arm and we were dancing together. And she was supposed to be Utuanaka, the corn goddess, and she became Utuanaka. And so I used to say they believe they become, but now I say they do become their gods, from having to have that experience to really see it more from their lenses and their visions. So upon death, to complete the life cycle, the shaman sings to sing the soul of the deceased, and they follow the path of the sun, and they go to the underworld where the night sun is. And then as it travels through, the shaman is helping guide their soul and will help them eventually, with the sun rising, find the sky above Wirikuta, where they'll be for eternity. And so it never ends, this life cycle for the Huichols and with peyote. So in closing, I wanted to show some really beautiful pictures of peyote. Here's some beautiful peyote designs of peyote. It's a yarn painting. And then I'm going to pass through this slide quickly and move to this, because I wanted to bring us to contemporary times too. Of course, I like to focus on the traditional because I want to make sure that it's getting documented. But Huichol's culture is fluid and it's transforming and changing as well. I really do think that the peyote is one of the main things that grounds it. And it enables the younger generations to be able to integrate the traditional and the modern. And globalization certainly has hit the Huichols too. But they have such a strong sense of who they are and their language and their gods, as well as the peyote and how important that is. But they've become a truck culture, and that's fine. They do artwork, which they put these peyote-inspired designs on. They've never seen a rhinoceros unless they've been to a zoo in Mexico City. Or this is R2-D2. Because they had a patron, or they had someone who was commissioning them to make some of these. They'd give them the objects and say, will you bead this? Because they had clients in Japan that this was going to go to. But the thing that really, really was the most amazing one that Jim and I saw was Darth Vader. But if you look, here's peyote coming out of his heart here. And down here, where his solar plexus is, it's peyote. This is how they Huicholize things, is how I say it. And then there was also, in the 80s, I met a young Huichol boy. He was, maybe 12? Jose Lopez Robles. And he came, my friend Susana, who I owe a debt of gratitude because she's the one who helped connect me with Huichols and has been like my sister through all of this, and ended up marrying a Huichol and has a center for Huichol cultural survival and the arts. Well, this family had come to her place, and so we gave him some of these pens, and this is one of his peyote experiences and his interpretation. This one's pretty wild, and snakes that are speaking to and trying to devour the sun. And so here he is when he's about 13, And here he is now. And he was raised in this traditional way, and now he's nationally known. He formed a group called Venado Azul, Blue Deer, and he is has music videos. And yet what's interesting is that they sing in Huichol, and in this particular music video that we're going to see, he's showing all of these Huichol traditional lifestyle things, but it's in a cumbia. And so it's sort of like they're influencing the Mexican, the mestizos about Huichol cumbias and all of this. And so if we can, it also has sexual innuendos that probably just Huichols, but maybe if you look hard enough, you'll see too. Sort of like a joke, an inside joke, I think.
Saludos para todas las mujeres del mundo. Ai kusundala kwe pita mai kwe tamale me tamu yama te chale papa te bari kare tema kwe tare tsuira ya o me me kame che tau nya chole che pano kwasi ya te neva e kama a ema kata ko uti sele be mo tai ne ya o me me kame che tau ne kusundal chita 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 pine 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 be du pine ya o me me kame che tau ne kusundala Cocinela, pamparios. Cocinala, cuita mai cuita mai cocinala, cocinala, cuita mai cuita mai cocinala, cocinala, cuita mai cocinala, cocinala, cuita mai cocinala, cocinala, cuita mai cocinala. Saludos para las panaderas y panaderos del mundo. Acusi, cocinela. Ai cocinela, pita mai cuita malime kamu yama te chale papa te bari kare ima cuita dai tuira ya o me kame che tau ni achuli che panu kwasi ya te neva e kama a ima kata ku uti chinale be mo tai ne ya o me kame che tau ne cocinela e kuchu be asauta pine tu be tu pine ne cocinela cocinela pamparios.
Okay. So that's my presentation.
Hello. Thank you very much, Stacy. Now we open up for questions.
Thank you so much for your talk. I'm curious about how religion, Catholicism, has influenced these communities, and if there's any syncretism with their peyote traditions, or if there's been a lot of cultural resistance, and also about the influence of spiritual tourism in the last couple decades, and whether any of the New Age is also entering those traditions, or how their resistance to those has stayed intact?
Yeah, good question. Unlike many indigenous people in Mexico, they didn't have the impact of the missionaries during the colonization and the conquest. The Spaniards didn't find anything they thought was of interest, and it's so remote up there that they kind of left them alone. They only had less than 100 years of Franciscan missions, and they didn't even live there. They would come for a period of time. They built a church that they would occasionally come to and try to slowly convert them. It wasn't until, and then there's the War of Independence, and so they separated and the missionaries were kicked out of the Sierras. It wasn't until the 60s that missionaries kept trying to come back in. So there is a very core part of Catholicism that's part of their religious traditions, in the sense that they do recognize Easter and some of the main Catholic rituals, but there's not a priest there. They don't allow priests to live there. And usually for Easter, it's the shamans who are the ones who are leading the 12 stations. And they do have these Christ figures. They will dress them in Huichol dress, and they will offer them peyote when the peyote pilgrims have arrived to the community. They also will take them to the temples for some of their ceremonies. But I think in their thinking, the more the better. The Catholicism in that respect seems like a pantheon of gods too, with all these santitos and virgins and things like that. But they, in a way, I think they kind of keep them separate too. But then more recent times, these evangelists have come in, and that's really bad. That's really bad. And so there's one little community near where we are, where we go, and Huichols that we know just say, these people don't believe in anything. They don't sacrifice their animals. They don't eat peyote. They don't do anything. They don't believe in anything. How could you follow a religion like that? So it is a challenge. But as far as the spiritual tourism, ever since I've been going up there, you never know who's going to show up from the outside. I've seen Europeans, even an Israeli who's come with Carlos Castaneda's book underneath their arm, translated. And Huichols, I guess, are used to this, not that they necessarily like it, but they are so self-assured about their traditions that they're not worried about sharing it with people. It's not so secretive per se as maybe the Native American church is, because I've worked with them quite a bit as well. And there's more of a problem, though, of these spiritual tourists who go down to Wirikuta, because peyote grows in very special areas, not many of them. And there's only a tiny place on the border in the United States and Texas where it grows. The rest is in Mexico. And there's a problem of overharvesting, destroying the environment. So there's a conflict with the Mexican government, always trying to develop the area. At one point, they wanted to put a superhighway through the middle of Wirikuta. And now there's also a problem, I see it, as the Native American church going down there and wanting to harvest as much peyote as possible and bring it back to the United States, because there isn't enough in the United States. There are more peyote eaters in the United States than there are in Mexico. And so it's really become a problem, and I don't know how it's going to be resolved. The most important thing, though, is first of all to protect Wirikuta, and that's in the process of being done.
Yeah. There's a question back here. I'll come back.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that.
Okay.
My question is about a few points that were sprinkled throughout your talk. The Darth Vader had the main, the most important embroidery on his heart, right?
Yes,
As you
yeah.
pointed out,
Yeah.
and also at the beginning, when you speak about, the use of peyote during pregnancy,
Yes.
you, at least I felt that you highlighted the first 3 months. Yeah. And I was wondering, it seems that from what I saw from your talk, that the major focus from a witch-all perspective would be the heart, not the brain.
Yes.
So I wonder
Yes.
what would
Yes.
do to our Western understanding of their culture if science was to focus on how the heart is doing during those times and how the heart is actually involved in our development, rather than focusing on, oh yeah, they get more connection in the brains,
Yeah.
and they get
Yeah.
a better nervous system, and they're better at music. We don't play music with our brain, we play music with our heart.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I just wanted, to know what you thought about that and whether there were other insights that you could share.
Right.
Thank you.
No, I agree with you. I do. And because I'm in academia, and I want people to appreciate and listen to what I've learned from the Weechels, I feel like I have to also frame it in Western scientific terms so that they can hear it. And then I always try to provide the Weechel interpretation too. And so then trying to cross those divides. And I do think the heart and the heart memory is the most important thing. Yeah.
Question?
Hi, Stacy. It is fascinating to see how a master plan, is integrated in the Huichol culture. Wow, it's a lot to learn from that. But my question is more related with the spirit of the plant.
Yes.
And few of us knows about the Venadito Azul, the blue deer.
Mhm.
And my question is, what is the meaning for the Huichol people of the blue deer?
The blue deer and peyote, they're the same thing. And the blue deer is Kayumari. Kayumari is the messenger god that the shamans don't talk directly to the gods. They talk to Kayumari. And Kayumari then goes out into the universe to find all the different gods and then gathers them together. That's why their ceremony takes so long, because he's looking for them all over the place and bringing them all together. And it's usually for a question or some kind of divination that they have to provide. And then they will share that to Kayumari. Kayumari will then tell the shaman, and then the shaman will tell the people. I mean, that's not to say that the shamans don't have these interactions with the other gods, but it's really more Kayumari is their focus god that helps them to bring them all in, because there's so many of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Muchas gracias, Stacy, por tu presentación. Al comienzo tú enfatizaste las dosis de una molécula y recién habíamos escuchado a Carlos Brecha subrayar la importancia del rito, del chamán trayendo arriba, abajo. ¿Podrías ilustrar un poco distintos tipos de ritos, distintos tipos de acciones que con una misma dosis o con una misma peyote podrían llevar a distintos viajes?
Yo creo que el viaje más distinto es lo que uno tiene cuando está en Wirikuta, porque estás en el desierto, el aire libre. Es el tiempo de tratar de tener una comunicación profundo, muy profundo con los dioses. En las ceremonias en la sierra, no, la intención no es tanto eso, es más bien para celebrar que algo está pasando. Por ejemplo, van a sembrar el maíz, han regresado del Wirikuta, van a empezar a limpiar la tierra para sembrar la cosecha, y pueden tener visiones en estos contextos, pero más bien es para sentir elevado y cumplir sus cargos o sus responsabilidades en la manera más hermosa para los dioses. Y puede decir que quizás algo le va a pasar y va a cantar, o va a tener un sueño que va a compartir con los demás por parte del peyote, pero es el viaje a Wirikuta en especial para cada persona tener sus comunicaciones y visiones.
Gracias, Stacy. I'll say it in English. Most people speak English here, isn't it? Okay. So thank you so much, Stacy. It is a privilege to hear someone who has been with them for 40 years. So I really appreciate that and everything that you said. And one question I have is, I have been reading that Wirikuta is being destroyed by mining.
That too.
So can you tell us in what state or what's happening with that struggle? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Wirikuta, above Wirikuta is an old mining town, and it was mined by the Spaniards. And over time it has been active, but then it was closed down. But more recently, a Canadian mining company, they're all over the world. They're trying to, I know, it's probably here too in Chile, right? Yeah. And so they've come and, they try to do these special deals behind closed doors with Mexican officials. And they've already started mining. And a really interesting thing happened, though, where Huicholes and their friends who were from Mexico, from other places in the world, started to unite. It was like a global village that came together with journalists and trying to get as much press. And they all went on the pilgrimage to Wirikuta with all the shamans, well, not all of them, but with shamans from the 5 major communities. It was huge. And some of the movie stars from Mexico and bands, rock bands, everybody came. And that put so much pressure on the Mexican government that they stalled those agreements. But I don't think it'll be forever. And at this moment, I don't know what the situation is. But you always have to be vigilant. It's never going to go away.
Muchas gracias, Stacy, súper interesante. Yo no voy a hacer ninguna pregunta, solo voy a dar un dato, y es que organizamos también con el Benja y con Manolo un ciclo de cine chamánico, y una de las películas que se dan es To Find Our Life,
Yes.
de Peter Furst, que es una maravilla y que muestra un viaje al Wirikuta, como en los 70, creo, por ahí, ¿no? 68, por ahí. Y además, aprovechando lo que conversó Carlos en la mañana, también hay se va a dar Eduardo el Curandero, que es un curandero en la costa, en Trujillo, en el Perú, usando San Pedro, y también está Don Emilio y sus doctorcitos, de Eduardo Luna, que se usa la ayahuasca. Entonces, yo no sé cuándo lo van a hacer eso, pero para que estén atentos.
Mañana miércoles.
Mañana miércoles.
Ah, qué bien, qué bien. Gracias.
I would like to make a question. Is it possible for you to elaborate a little bit on the idea? I think you called it Iyari, which was the heart memory.
Yes. Yeah. Iyari, everyone is born with an Iyari, but you don't automatically get the wisdom from it. You have it in you. It's generations from your ancestors. But in order to access it, you have to follow the traditions and the customs. And it takes your lifetime. But you recognize as you're getting closer and closer that your iyari, your heart memory, your creativity actually is alive. But you have to nourish it and you have to follow these traditions in order for it to flourish and blossom. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question here. Awesome. Yeah, this is the last question, by the way, so I'm very sorry.
I'm curious about the death rites amongst the Huichol. Will the elderly and infirm take peyote and ceremony with the community to help people integrate the loss of that member ahead of time and things like that?
No. It will only be under ritual circumstances that's not necessarily associated with death. And when someone dies, they see that the soul, they're very souls, but they see that the souls have separated from the body. And one of the greatest fears, though, that Huichols have is to die outside of the Sierras because they're afraid they're going to get cremated. And that then their soul the shaman won't be able to be as successful in sending the soul up to the sky above Wirikuta. And that actually happened to one of my compadres. He was in Guadalajara and he died of COVID. And nobody knew at that time if the dead body was contagious. And they wanted to bring his body back up to the Sierras, so they cremated him. And I'm talking to some of his family members, and they said, yeah, they gave us this box to us, and they said he was inside. And it was the strangest thing. We just didn't know what to do with it. And so they ended up, though, burying it in the graveyard next to his mother and his sister who had passed away, and treated it as if it were a real body.
Awesome. Well, I would like to thank you, Stacy, for your beautiful presentation.
Thank you.